Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the VMblog Expert Interview Series. I'm David Marshall, and today we're once again joined by Or Weis, the co-founder and CEO of Permit. It's been a while since we last spoke, so looking forward to catching up with you again today.
Thanks, David. I'm really excited to be here again. I've enjoyed our previous conversation, and I have a sense that I'm going to enjoy this one as well. Thank you for having me.
So I know it's been a minute since we talked. So for the folks who might be watching this video and didn't get a chance to see the other one, maybe give a quick overview of Permit.
Yeah, for sure. So Permit is a full stack permissions as a service solution. Our premise is that you'll never have to build permissions again. If you've ever used software, and I bet you have, you've probably noticed that every element of software today has access control with experiences like user management, with the ability to assign roles, audit logs, invites, approval flows, emergency access, etc., etc., etc. And the sad fact is, every time you've used something like that, some poor schlep of a developer had to create them from scratch. I created it 5 times over and over in my previous company when it wasn't even 3 years old. So with Permit, we're trying to solve this and end to end. We give you all the infrastructure, all the APIs, and all the experiences you need to embed into your software so you'll never have to build permissions again. Key among the experiences we provide is a policy editor that I like to say a monkey can use, or even a product manager if they're smart enough. And it generates policy as code for you in languages like Rego for OPA and Cedar for AWS's Cedar. And I think we'll actually talk more about that soon.
Yeah, I know it's a big announcement. It's a big deal in the industry. As you said,
Mm-hmm.
AWS, they just open sourced a security project called AWS Cedar. Correct me if I'm wrong. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, this is a big deal for identity access management, right?
It's a huge deal. I think the biggest problem that this space has around permissions and access control is awareness. So if we look at the previous category, authentication, if we'd go like 7 years back, 10 years back, if you go to engineers and tell them, do you want to build authentication or use authentication as a service? And people would go like, what's authentication as a service? And like, do you expect me to trust a third party for something that critical as part of my application? But nowadays we know it's the complete opposite. People would go, what am I, insane to build this critical aspect on my own? And we had this standards come up. We have this renaissance of how we do authentication come in, and people realizing that they can rely on these tools instead of constantly rebuilding authentication. And authorization is very much similar. It's a bigger problem. It's more deeply ingrained. It's more challenging in both scope and depth that you need to solve. But even though that's the case, it doesn't have the awareness that authorization has. Most people till this day are still building access control, permissions, authorization for their applications on their own, including all those experiences, all those UI components that I mentioned before. And so AWS coming in and saying, this is a big thing. You shouldn't be building this completely on your own. You shouldn't be reinventing the wheel over and over. You should have at least the fundamentals you need to be able to build this right, to build this in a secure fashion, in a stable fashion, and one that will speed up your developer velocity, and you won't have to constantly rebuild things. So they're coming in and saying this as a big player, this behemoth in the market, coming in with that statement and supporting it both as a service and even more importantly and more excitingly as open source is a real big statement that I hope would raise awareness across the space. And the fact that AWS is open source this is doubly interesting because they don't open source things often. It's really not in their nature. But I think they recognize that, hey, this is a huge problem that needs standards, and open source is a way to build standards. And so they recognize that it needs to be done in this way here. And B, they realize that they need the community around this. And by doing so, I think they're doing a great service. And I also think that they've done some great work with Cedar, with the language itself. Though I will say, um, it's not necessarily the language per se that is critical here. We have other policy as code languages like Rego for OPA, and OSO, and there's actually, and CASBIN. There's actually quite a long list. But the ability to adopt it, and also some good stress points that they've put into the language. For example, focusing on more readability, even for a layman. These are ideas that they're bringing in that will raise the maturity across the space. And I think developers being polyglot, being able to choose and mix and match between these different languages, they can get a lot of power, and it can really improve applications in our development velocity.
You mentioned it earlier, but permits a full stack permissions framework, and you all have already integrated with AWS Cedar. How did you guys do that so fast? And what are some of the benefits that people are interested in AWS Cedar might get by leveraging the permit platform?
Yeah, it's a great question. So first I'll say I have to preface this and say I'm not actually at liberty to share all of the details, but I can say that AWS have really done an amazing thing in how they go about promoting this project, in reaching out to the community and trying to work with other open source projects. So we, as part of Permit, we're growing and maintaining a open source project called OPAL, Open Policy Administration Layer, which is the de facto way today to run OPA at scale. And now in general, the right way, or one of the best ways to run policy agents at scale and load them with the policy and data that they need. So I think AWS recognized the importance of other open source projects and the standards in the space, and OPAL included. And I think that created a lot of conversations that allowed our community around OPAL and also around Permit to be savvy to what's going on with AWS Cedar and the changes in the space, and react to them as quickly as we can. And the other part of that is that we realize that this is important. We realize that this is a key step in the maturity of the ecosystem. And as leaders in this space, it's our responsibility to promote this maturity. So we shouldn't just let it stay on the shelf. We should make the best efforts that we can to bring it both into our own open source project, into OPAL, and into Permit. So we created OPAL and enabled it with Cedar through another open source project called Cedar-Agent, which is essentially the best way today to deploy and run Cedar in your applications. So if you want to run Cedar within AWS, you'll soon have Amazon verified permissions, which is a great service that they're providing. But what about running this locally? What about running this on another cloud? What about running this on-prem? So this is where Cedar-Agent comes in. And combined with OPAL, you can run Cedar-Agent at scale. And all of this comes to a point in Permit. Permit just uses both OPA, Cedar, OPAL, all of these together in a way that you don't necessarily have to worry about. And it just makes it work. And you can choose which policy language, which policy engine to use at any point in time. And Permit will generate policy as code for you through that low-code monkey can use interface I described before, and load it into your Git repository. So you get the benefits of policy as code without all the hassle of necessarily having to learn another policy as code language. You always can, and you always have full control of the language itself and how it gets executed, and you can write more code for it. But you don't have to. And maybe more importantly, the other stakeholders on your team, the product managers, security and compliance, sales, professional services, all of these which have to work on access control anyway, now they have a way to chime in on the conversation, even though it's in code. So you get, I'd love to say, the best of both worlds. You manage it as code, but it's accessible for everyone, even if they don't know code.
Now, you mentioned a lot there about AWS Cedar. You talked about your two open source projects, OPAL and Cedar-Agent, and how these things interact and work with AWS Cedar. Are you worried that there are too many tools out there or projects for folks to keep track of? How do you square that? How do you keep people from worrying about too many different tools to operate within their environment?
Yeah, so I don't think everyone needs all of the tools all of the time. but it's good to have the options. And everyone, I think one of the key things I know about developers by, well, first of all, knowing myself as a developer and working with these kindred spirits, I think one of the main things is that developers are by nature polyglots, and they love to use the right tool for the right task. So it's not about using all of them at once. That's really a silly idea. Mm-hmm. But having the ability to take off the shelf and easily bring into your software the right tool that is relevant for what you're building now, that's ideal. And I think just like we have tens and even hundreds, depends on if you count, of programming languages and programming frameworks, the same thing applies here. This is a big problem, a big space, and we need multiple tools so we can have the agility and flexibility to address problems as they arise. That being said, it can be daunting to start, and that's one of the things we're solving with Permit. It's a one-stop shop that does all of it for you. You can always go in, as I said, you can always dive in and learn the languages and use the different tools and tweak any little thing. Everything is API-driven, but you don't have to. If you just want to have RBAC, you just snap your fingers, click a button, and then we generate it for you, and it would instantly work in your app, including with the interface, including with the ability to assign roles out of the box. So the idea with Permit is really to give you the ease to get started and to give you the leisure of choosing how deep you want to go at each point in time and never taking away that power from you. And that's in general, the philosophy I believe in developer tools. Make it as easy as possible, but also don't hide away the power. Let people go into the more advanced features when they want and when they're ready.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. We're now into 2023, and it's amazing, all these different tools that are coming out, just making things easier for folks, right? In the workplace, you said it. Even a monkey could use it. So it gives hope to folks like me who consider themselves possibly, not as smart as a monkey when it comes to some of this stuff. So where do you see things going? I mean, how much easier can things get?
Dramatically so. So I think even with Permit, so we've created interfaces that produce both role-based access control and attribute-based access control for you. And we're bringing in relationship-based access control as the next step. And also the ability to shift quickly between these models and future models as they arise. So I think it's really about simplifying the process of thinking about policy models and thinking about how they meet the behavior of your application. That's really what we need to speed up. And I think it's really easy to, I think it's really apparent to see how that need's going to increase when you think about machine learning agents. So now that's the hottest trend. Everyone's embedding ChatGPT into their app. And that actually means that in like a couple of months, agents within one app are going to be talking to agents within another app that are going to be acting on agents in another app. And somewhere down the line, it's going to be a human user. So just think about the permissions matrix here. What is my AI agent allowed to do with your AI agent on your behalf within another application? So just saying this sentence can be overwhelming, right? So if we don't have the good standards and if we don't have the interfaces to simplify this for us silly humans, maybe even silly monkeys, that's or apes, I should be more politically correct and more biologically correct. So unless we have these tools, we're going to get lost in this sea of distributed applications with distributed AI agents. So it's not just about making what's already here simple enough. It's what's around the corner that I'm really concerned about. And it's both from a security perspective and also just a usability perspective. We don't want to waste our time just rubbing our heads like, okay, so he was able to access that resource because he convinced that AI agent to pretend he's his grandmother. And as his grandmother, it really loves to do things for him. So it allowed him to skip some of the access control in the basic API. So that's going to be insane. So we need things a lot more sophisticated and a lot more simplified just to be able to carry the day-to-day. And I think the work that we're doing at Permit and the work that the overall community, the open source community, is doing in creating standards here that both enable us to think about this, model this, and load this quickly and iterate on this quickly within applications is super critical. And that's partly why I'm so excited about this motion into the market.
Or I really appreciate you taking time talking with VMblog today. I always enjoy our conversations, and I agree with you. We're living in a time, it's mind-blowing, some of the stuff that's coming down the pipe as far as integrating AI and Chat GPT into things. So I'm really looking forward to where things go, even in the next couple of months.
Me too, and thanks for having me. As you said, it's been a very enjoyable call, and I look forward to the next one.
Well, before I let you go, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, based on the conversation that we had today, where should folks go if they want to learn more about Permit or, even some of the AWS Cedar or some of the open source projects like Opal and Cedar-Agent that we talked about?
Yeah, so the easiest thing to do is go to permit.io. It's easy to type into your address bar. When you get there, obviously you can go through the website, and on the top there's a Slack icon. If you click that, you get into our Slack community, and then you can just DM me and ask questions. You can obviously post in the global forums and interact with everyone in the community. But if you were curious to learn about anything we talked about here today, you're more than welcome to message me there. I'll be happy to both share more thoughts and help you on the specific things you're working on, both with open source best practices and obviously if you want Permit itself, but that's not a requirement for the conversation.
That's great. That's real nice of you. And like you said, it's all part about community, right?
Exactly. And creating these standards and creating this motion forward.
Great. All right. Well, I look forward to the next time that we're able to catch up.
Likewise. Thank you very much.
All right.